Well, Charlie, you offer a professional banjo setup service, right? Where people can come to you with instruments of all
Right.
types and you can maximize their potential and so on. Is every banjo unique and different? Once you get a hold of it,
They are. Yeah, uh, you have to look at them as individuals, because wood is individual.
and everybody's picking style has a different tone to it as well, right? So don't you try to
Right.
match the sound that the owner wants to achieve, which what you can do.
Sometimes if they deliver it in person, we can sit here and talk and say, I can quiz them about
Hmm.
some of their techniques that they use and of course listen to their banjo first when they
Yep.
do bring it in, and they can tell me what they would like for it to do that it may not be doing right at the moment.
What kind of things do you hear with banjos that come in that, let's say, are doing things right or not doing things right? How would you, you know,
Well, um, I go over the banjo from the headstock to the tailpiece and all the internal stuff. You got to have a good neck fit.
hmm
Although I've heard great sounding banjos with paper shims in the neck.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I've seen the same thing too. So it all depends on the instrument, right? I mean,
It does. It depends on how the instrument's performing.
I've got shims in that six string, by the way, that you were just fooling with because
Mm-hmm.
I've been fooling with the action on that, and
Right.
so on. But we all know how important that contact patch is. Do you tend to advocate having a tight fit between the fingerboard and the tension hoop, or should there be a gap there?
Well, the tension hoop should be able
Move
to
without.
adjust up
Hmm.
and down. Uh, all heads are not created equal. Sometimes a head will uh, meet this clearance, and sometimes it won't, depending on what kind of banjo it is. Usually with the stuff that I work with, which I mainly work on Gibson stuff.
Hmm.
Although I see everything. I see Stellings, um, cheaper banjos, student models, banjo mandolins,
Hmm.
tenors, plectrums. Uh, uh, if it's out there, it usually gets through here.
Okay.
And the big difference in especially a lot of your 80s and 90s student grade banjos is I've seen some really strange heads that were actually oversized, and you go to put a standard 11-inch head on them, they won't even go on the tone ring.
Mm-hmm.
So
Hmm.
you have to address all those things.
Yep.
Um,
We say we use different terms to describe tone. They say, "Oh, this banjo rings like a bell," or "I wish that it would," or whatever. And now I'm sure you've heard instruments that when you pluck them, it sounds like the sound is not just coming from the head of the banjo, but it's coming from inside the pot, or in extreme cases, midway up the neck. You know what I'm
yeah,
talking about?
yeah.
What is your opinion that causes that, and is that the epitome of good banjo sound, or is there something that some people may not like about that?
Well, I think everybody has a different idea um, in their mind of what they believe is good, or what they believe is a sound that they can work with and can play with.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, to me, um, you know, Gibson banjos. Let's just use them because they are what I see the most. Your different wood materials, fingerboard materials, plating, uh, resonator, uh, the various types of wood that these banjos are built out of. Uh, John Doe picking one up off the shelf. Uh, there's no way he can know
Mm-hmm.
what he's buying sound-wise if he's just getting into banjo.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, uh, so a lot of people buy banjos just on the way they look. Oh, I love that wood. It's pretty.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Blah blah blah. Well, with each one of those species of wood, uh, there comes a different set of tone characters.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in your analysis of a banjo, You may figure that out before you go to the store and buy one or trade for one, or you may figure it out afterwards. I know all that stuff because I have to know the animals, so to say, to get them to perform. And so if a guy buys, let's say he buys a used RB4 late model master tone banjo, he's buying a walnut nickel plated banjo. Again, he's pretty much bought it on the appearance. So when he buys the banjo and he starts playing it, hopefully it's set up good. Some people live with banjos that don't sound good or begin to sound bad after they do purchase them. They say, well, you know, this thing sounded pretty good when I got it, but now 3 years later it sounds like a tub of lard, you know, and they don't understand or comprehend the fact that these banjos are so adjustable. You can make them sound practically any way that's in your head if you take the time to do that.
Do you advocate 3-ply rims or block rims? Do you have a preference either way?
Well, they're both good. I see a few block rims occasionally. I'm a traditionalist. I play traditional bluegrass, and I want to play it on the right machine. You know, and so I like the 3-ply multi-ply rim. All I'm playing these days is old pre-war master tone banjos.
Yep, and you described that one to us earlier. That's the one that you were playing here.
Right, this one is really doing the job right now. You know.
Do you try different bridges, to see if small changes in the wood density and so on?
Sure. Yeah, I keep probably 75 or more bridges, and you're welcome to.
Yeah, so that's one way to.
I keep bridges. I have to have bridges, to do the customer the best job that I can do. I have to, if I'm going to hang my shingle out and say I'm a banjo setup guy, I can't just have 3 bridges.
Yeah.
You know, I got to have the variety that will hopefully cover me on whichever and whatever banjo comes in here.
Do you have a pretty good ear to know, like, if you hear something, oh yeah, this needs a certain type of bridge, a certain gauge string, a certain head tension or so on, or anything like that?
Yeah, well, head tension can be narrowed down to, or narrowed down by the material that the neck is made of, because maple, mahogany, walnut are all different densities or hardnesses, and they give off certain tones and characteristics of sound. So if you have, let's say you have a mahogany neck, which is the softest of the 3 woods, you would want a bridge that carried several grain lines right in here to show its density, and that would possibly give the mahogany a nice balance across the board, lows, mids, and highs. And the only way to figure that out is methodically, get the bridge on the banjo, get a good head on the banjo, whatever type of wood it is. Mahogany, typically your head will run a G sharp to an A.
Okay, so there's a correlation. I mean, is there a rule of thumb between head tension and neck wood that, let's say, mahogany needs a tighter neck, a looser neck than maple, or whatever? What?
And then there's the tone ring. There's the rim. All that has to be considered. I see everything in here. I see everybody's products. There's no bad products on the market. Everything out there today is excellent.
How do you like a tone ring to fit on a rim? Do you like it to fall off if you turn it over? Do you want to have to pry it off with a putty knife, or what?
Well,
again, we've seen all difference. I've seen.
I've seen. I have to say, I've seen great sounding banjos in all those respects.
Yeah, you can rattle the tone rings back and forth on the rim and they sound great. Others are real tight and they sound great.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I would have to just go, if you're asking what I would prefer, if I were taking an old rim or a new rim, whatever, and having it cut to fit a ring, I would just play the odds right down the middle and say, I'd like a slip fit. I'd like something that slips on and has a little whoosh to it, yet I can still
pull it off with
lay
your
it back
hands.
down, pick the ring up by the skirt, and pull it off the banjo.
Mm-hmm.
That's middle of the road.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And that's where I have to lie,
Yeah.
because I've heard them great sounding banjos on rings that you couldn't pry off with a crowbar, and I've heard great sounding ones that fall off
Yep.
on the bench.
How critical is tuning the head in the tone chamber? I mean, Roger Siminoff always talked about that, and I used to think, well, if tuning the tone chamber was so important and the resonator distance and so on from the bottom of the rim was critical, then to the point where it either made or broke the banjo tone, then you couldn't have an open back banjo that was any good, because if it needed that resonator to dial in that last bit of extra, I've heard open back banjos that ring like bells, and obviously there's no resonator at all. So what's going on in there? What's your take on that?
Well, I guess I would have to refer, in that case, to specs. Your resonator brackets on a master tone style banjo are bent at 90 degrees.
And they actually contact the lip of the resonator, which we can see right in there. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Right, they're at 90 degrees, and a lot of folks tighten these down real tight. When they do, over the years of picking the banjo up, setting it down in the case, contorting it when you're playing, it puts a lot of pressure on these brackets right here, and a lot of the brackets that I see are bent, usually up from 90 degrees, and if a banjo comes in here with excessive L bracket, say the L brackets look like this when they should look like this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, when they look like this, then your rim is setting way too far down into the resonator, causing compression. So I refer back to specs on something like that.
Okay.
It's like putting a new set of plugs in your car.
Yeah, gap them at whatever the factory
Do
says.
what the factory says. The car might be running fine with 200,000 miles on the plugs, but it's like a mechanic told me one time when I asked him, should I change them? He said, yeah, it may be running fine. He said, but just think how much better it'll run with new plugs.
Yeah.
And so from that mindset, to have the fitting parts of the banjo correct, I don't think it's going to take away from the sound.
Yeah.
And so anytime I can refer to that in a setup, it puts the ball in my court as far as bringing sound out of the instrument.
Well, a lot of people, I think if they said, if I had my druthers, I wish my banjo, and the usual response is, would ring a little bit more, would have a little bit more growl, you know what I'm talking about, as opposed to sound like it's got a rag stuffed inside it or something like that.
Right.
If somebody comes to you with a banjo like that, how do you go about trying to get more growl and guts and ring out of it or something, if that's what you're going for, after you've figured out what the customer wants and what the banjo is? Because I think that more often than not, a lot of banjos with impaired tone fit into that category. Would you kind of...
I can go with that.
Yep.
I would first refer to the customer and the banjo to make sure that the owner of the banjo has a banjo that's capable of doing the sound that he wants. If he bought a chrome-plated walnut banjo and he wanted it to sound dark and deep and velvety, he's got the wrong banjo.
Yeah.
Okay, and so from that standpoint, what I do is to analyze that aspect that comes in. Then I try to make or let the banjo be the best it can be for what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I had a guy one time years ago that brought me a really nice flathead style 3 that he had just bought, and he brought it in and handed it to me. He said, "Play this, tell me what you think." So I did. I said, "Man, this thing sounds great."
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "What would you do to it?" And I said,
Nothing.
I said, "I don't know if I could do anything
Yeah,
to enhance it." I said, "What do you want it to sound like?" He said, "I want it to sound like a granada."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Okay, let's take it back a step. You know, a mahogany nickel-plated banjo is not going to sound like a granada."
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And of course, then they say, "Well, Earl's was," and I said, "Well, no, Earl's wasn't either. Earl's was a granada ring and rim.
Right,
You know,
right.
it was not
Uh-huh.
a nickel tone ring. There was something different about that banjo. Although he changed everything else on it, either consciously or not, it was his sound. But anyway, if you get past that point to where the person has bought a banjo that will do what they want it to do,
Mm-hmm.
I can make it happen. You know, if they bought the right
Okay.
banjo. But now, if somebody bought a granada and said, "Man, I want this thing I want it to be dry and stiff and no overtones," well, that's not what a granada does. A granada does the sweet thing with the notes that tie together, and it's a very musical thing. You know?
Do you
It's a
think?
musical banjo?
Mm-hmm. What do you think will kill a banjo's tone, regardless of whether it's a granada or a 3 or anything like that? What sort of things are definite problems that that you have to fix from time to time if sick ones come in? What do you find that?
Well, most typically is tailpieces, bridges, heads.
The easily adjustable and changeable parts,
Yeah,
huh? That
yeah.
can, and again, the neck fit, the heel fit, you say is critical, right?
Right. Yeah, you've got to, if this neck is cut on the machine to fit a 5/8 bridge, and all of a sudden you see somebody playing an 11/16, and you say, "Oh, I like the way that sounds because the strings are up off the
Yeah.
head and
Mm-hmm.
it's got extra volume and blah blah blah,"
Mm-hmm.
and you go buy you an 11/16 bridge, and then the action's this high,
Uh-huh.
and then you start cranking the co-rods,
Oh, yeah.
and
Mhm.
then you start cranking the truss rod. You don't want to do that because
Mhm.
it's this neck pitch and cut is specific to the height of the bridge.
Mhm.
That's how this is determined.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so I see people that come in like that, and we have to take the banjo and recut the neck if they're married to the top
Yeah, and hope
bridge.
that the rim isn't out of whack and so on and so
Right.
forth.
Sometimes they have to take the entire pot down when the rim is egg shaped and let it set for a couple
Yeah.
of days. Let
Mhm.
it find its way back to whatever neutral is.
How tight do you like to tighten the coordinator rods to the neck? Do you really like to crank those down tight, or do you like to leave a little bit of a forgiveness in there?
Yeah, usually not too tight. Not too tight. A good snug fit, and then just kind of bump it a little bit till it feels like it's sturdy enough to
Mhm.
stay in tune.
Okay, so you're not trying to just deform the wood and put dents in the rim or recontour the neck.
No, you're not trying to. You don't want to do that because see this thing here, whatever this thing is based around vibration. And if you put too much air in a basketball,
It doesn't.
you can't play with
Yeah.
the damn
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You can say, "Oh, it's full of air," and it is, but try to bounce it.
Right.
And these are the same way. When I do setups, I try to get the banjo in tune with itself, if that makes any
Yep.
sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh,
How about the nuts on the other end of the coordinator rod? Should they be left kind of just loose or finger tight, or do they need some kind of a grip on?
Just snug, If you go putting too much pressure on any of those nuts and rods in there, you're inhibiting vibration.
How can someone tell the optimum balance between head tension and, bridge weight, string weight, the downward pressure, and so on? Isn't that one of the things to get the most response, is that they're supposed to be equal or roughly so, so that you're getting the maximum vibration of the parts in there? Is that a good analogy?
Well, the way I determine that is through the ear.
Mm-hmm.
I've been playing these old flathead Gibsons since 1981. Is when I got my first one, and we talked earlier about working all those shows and theme parks and stuff. I know what these banjos are supposed to sound like because I've learned through playing one and owning one, and not only owning one, but 20 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say 20, and talking with the old masters of these things. McPeak, Crow, Osborne, there's certain characters that a good and a great banjo have, and that's why these men played these things, is because they produced
Yep.
a lot of sound.
And does a banjo get better with age? Is it like fine wine?
I'd say to a degree it does. It does. A lot of banjos. And I've talked with these guys that I just mentioned. We've talked about this aspect of it too. You can pick a banjo up one day and it sounds pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Pick it up the next day and it's like, well, this thing doesn't sound as good today as it did yesterday.
Would it be humidity, or what do you think would be the cause of that?
Well, there's certainly that, but point being, a lot of times banjos sound better if you hear them one day, then they sound pretty good, and you hear them the next day and they don't sound pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
It could be you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's pilot error is
Sure.
a prominent thing when it comes to, as you say, humidity, weather, because the first thing I believe that changes when those conditions change is
The
our
ear.
pressure.
Oh yeah.
Here, we may not hear as good.
That I never
today
thought about
as
it, but
we did yesterday.
that makes sense.
And you get these things once they settle in. Most banjos that I see, if when someone picks it up after it's been set up with a new head, new bridge, and they take it home and they start playing it, it's a common question. It's like, what am I going to need to do to it? Well, you're going to need to listen to it. You're going to need to listen to it right after the setup, and if you start hearing it change, give me a call, or